Hi, I'm RE/MAX Realtor Scott Garrison with RE/MAX Town & Country, East Orlando's #1 real estate company, here with my realtor partner, Deanna Sacoto. And you're here with Tina Keys. Tina, I'm sure you've been on lots of videos, lots of podcasts and stuff. Everyone introduces you. Why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us who you are so we make sure we get exactly what you want us to get.
Sure. My name is Tina Keys. I have a business, an office in Winter Springs. My business is called Florida Divorce Coaching and Mediation, and I specialize in working with parents who are trying to get the divorce through the divorce process amicably, affordably, and actually like each other in the end.
So I have some questions about real estate.
Okay.
So
Shoot.
let's get to the point. Who gets to keep the house in a divorce?
So I would say that definitely depends on how you get divorced. So there's a lot of options. I kind of tell people most divorces start and end the same way, right? You start with one person or both people saying this is kind of the next step in our relationship, and it always ends with that final judgment from the judge, which makes you officially divorced. But what you do in that process in between is really what's going to determine the rest of your life, right? So you hear about these nasty divorces that drag out 2 years. They go to court for everything. The judge has to follow the statute to the letter because people cannot sort of get out of their own way and make their own decisions, right? And then there's the opposite end of it, which is what we in this industry call the kitchen table divorce, which is literally two people sitting at a kitchen table for 15 minutes, dividing their assets up, filing themselves, and that's kind of the end of it. Then there's a lot in between. And so what I do is somewhere in between that, which is mediation. And in mediation, you can really do whatever you want to do. So that's the wonderful thing with mediation. Two people get to sit at a table with someone helping guide that conversation and do whatever they can both agree to. The judge does not care. If you can both agree, they are on board. I see people where one person completely walks away from the house, gives it 100% to the other person. I see situations where they divide 50-50 to the letter, to the penny. So there's really no one way to do things. So long as both parties can agree, you can do whatever you're both comfortable with. The other great thing about mediation is we can look at interesting creative solutions that you're not going to get when you go to a courtroom, right? So rather than just having to either sell the house or refinance, like those are the only two options, we can look at tons of unique ways to handle it. So like, for example, I had a case recently where they had other assets. The wife was able to use those assets to purchase her own home. And they both agreed that the husband could keep the home for 5 years before he had to sell it. So both kids got out of high school, able to have one of the homes they grew up in, and they were both in agreement to sell it in 5 years. You know, they agreed who's the realtor, who's the title going to be, how are we going to handle changes in value in the home, how are we going to deal with that. It was all written in their agreement, right? But it gave them both what they wanted because they agreed to let the kids sort of have that one constant for the next 5 years. They were both teenagers. And they both were so amicable that they were able to really get creative. And what was cool about that case is they consulted with a mortgage broker, and they were able to do an assignment of debt in the marital settlement agreement. So the wife was not responsible for the mortgage loan because of the divorce, which allowed her to then purchase a home. Underwriter can remove that loan off of her loan to or debt to income ratio, and she's now free to buy a home. And so this is the kind of stuff that we can do in mediation, or if you pursue collaborative divorce, that's another process that's similar, where you're not going to get that in a courtroom. There's no time, there's not enough information. You know, the judge is limited in what they're able to even do. So there's really a huge opportunity if people can sit down and at least try to mediate through as much as they can. They can really come up with such better outcomes and involving the right professionals. This is a big thing I tell people. You need to get professionals involved early who understand what they're doing. Realtors, mortgage officers who have been doing this for a long time, not like 1-800 whatever, but like people who are local, who get it, who understand what they're doing, who can guide you, because there's so many options out there if you have the right people involved in the conversation. And family law attorneys, they're really good at the law, but they're going to tell you to go talk to a realtor, talk to a mortgage broker, talk to your financial advisor, your CPA, right? Those are the experts in their fields. So having those people involved early can make a huge difference for people.
And that's one of the reasons why we do these videos. You know, I've been a realtor here in Central Florida every day full time for 35 years. And there's a huge difference between a realtor team who sold thousands and thousands and thousands of homes and someone who's just starting on it who sold 20 or 30 homes for the last couple of years, as far as what they can do to get you your equity, to make it easy, to refer you to someone like Tina, to save you a lot of money from the outset.
So in Florida, how is the real estate divided in a divorce?
Yeah, so like, I mean, there's statutes that govern that. If you end up before a judge, that generally it's kind of like a 50-50 state across the board, right? But I see people do all kinds of creative things. You know, I've got a couple cases right now where they're going to do a refinance and a cash buyout of the other person. Okay. So like one person wants to stay in the home, they're going to refinance, they're going to buy out the other person, the cash equity that they're owed from the home. I see other people where maybe one person just keeps the home in its entirety and then the other person is bought out through other assets. So like, let's say house is worth $500,000, the mortgage is $200,000, but they have a really great interest rate. They have like a 2.75 interest rate from back in the day, right? And so they'll agree, let's say if the equity is $300,000, that means somebody owes the other person $150,000, right? They'll take that $150,000 from something else. Okay. And that allows the person to keep their entire situation intact if they're the only one on the mortgage. So these are things that can be done. And again, it's getting the consultants involved, getting the professionals involved, talking through and having the space to talk through all the options. I tell this to people all the time. Mediation gives you the opportunity to think and slow down. Because when you're trying to go back and forth through email, you're not seeing each other, you're not talking to each other, right? The type of mediation I do, it's what's called pro se mediation. It's two people without lawyers in a room with me, virtual room usually, Zoom, talking through the issues that they need to talk through. Because at its core, divorce is just a problem-solving exercise, really. It's a lot of times math problems. It's trying to figure out how do we get to a fair resolution there's a reason it's called equitable distribution and not equal distribution, because that doesn't always mean everything 50-50 to the penny. Because depending how their life was before that, what decisions they made financially together, there may be reasons why it doesn't make sense to do it 50-50, right? So in mediation, when it's just the three of us, we have the space to really craft agreements that take into account your entire history together, and that both people can walk away from this being like, you know what, I feel really good about what I'm signing. You might not love every term in there, but you can say, okay, I know why we made those decisions, and we both compromised in certain areas, but we both can live with this outcome. It's usually a very different outcome if people go before a judge, because one person is the winner and one person loses, and then you don't really come back from that. It's really hard to come back from that sort of sitting in a courtroom on the other side of the table from someone and then going to your kid's soccer game 2 hours later. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And pretty much any family court judge that has practiced any type of collaborative law will tell you that, like, this is not the process that we should be doing this in, but it's the only process that we have, because technically marriage is a legal contract.
It's the only process that most people have until they come to see you.
Yeah, so mediation is such a better alternative.
So just to be clear, you're not an attorney, correct?
I am not an attorney.
But people are going to call you if they're thinking about getting a separation or divorce, or if they have some type of paternity issues, maybe not marriage, but there's children involved, right? So the first thing you think is, we should get an attorney, right? And instead they call you.
Yes.
So tell me, who is it that normally calls you first? Who are the kind of people that could use your services that you usually end up talking to?
So a lot of people find me early in the process. They sort of reach that point of, okay, we're getting a divorce, this is happening, and now we don't know what to do next, right? So a lot of times the finances might still be together. Somebody might have just moved out or is just trying to figure out where to move out to. They might still be living together. They're really trying to find a process that is going to put their kids first. I mostly work with parents of minor children. A lot of the parents I work with have like young children. They got a lot of years of co-parenting ahead of them, and they know that. A lot of the people who work with me are children of nasty divorces themselves. They were 12, 7, the parents got divorced. It created a nightmare for them in their childhood. The parents couldn't be in the same room together. It was constant tension, and they're now facing a divorce in their 30s, 40s, and they are like, this is the last thing I want to do to my kids. Like, there's got to be a better way to do this. A lot of the people I work with, they could afford lawyers if they wanted to, but they choose not to. They say, you know what, let's see how far we can get without all that intervention. And then in the end, if we want to have it reviewed by a lawyer, it's always on the table. If at any point during the process you want to have an hour consult with a lawyer, make sure you're making the right call, it's always on the table. But it's just this mindset of like, okay, you know, we got into this relationship, everything we've built in our lives, we've built without lawyers to this point, right? And so now we're going to try to unravel as much as we can without involving so many other elements and making it feel like we're on separate islands.
So the people who are thinking about calling you, there's obviously two sides in the separation.
Mm-hmm.
So is there one side that you favor? Is there one side that should call you? What would you say to someone who wants to call you and then their partner finds out they're going to call you and the default response is, I need an attorney?
So I will say this, generally I end up doing consults with both people. Usually one person finds me, they kind of talk to me, they feel good about the process, and then I'll 9 times out of 10 talk to their partner as well in a separate conversation. They can do it in person if they want. My office is in Winter Springs, or virtually. A lot of people like Zoom nowadays because it's just easier. And so I usually do consults separately with people, sometimes together, depending how amicable they are and, you know, where they're at. And then, you know, this is a process where both people really have to be bought in. You have to want to do it this way. You know, I honestly, the thing that I love most about what I do is I get to work with some really wonderful humans. Like, the people who work with me genuinely care about each other's well-being. They don't want to screw each other over. They don't want to be in a position where one person wins and the other person loses. That's not the mindset. You know, they probably did the couples counseling. They probably tried really hard to fix or save the marriage, and they couldn't do it. And now they're facing this dynamic that they're going to have 2 households, but they want their kids to feel like they still have like one family in a way, right? And they just don't want their kids to grow up in a fragmented childhood. So I think that's, for me, you know, if that's the mindset that you both have and you're really trying to figure out how do we get through this without, you know, completely destroying our children's childhood, then that's probably a good person for me to talk to. I do tell people also, if you've got someone on the other side who's just not really there, you know, they're really hurt, like mediating and working peacefully. They want an attorney. Yeah, they want to do it a little bit different way. I work with people one-on-one. There's a lot we can do one-on-one to move a process forward in an amicable way. It takes 2 people to fight. So if one person is choosing to, you know, focus on things they can control, choosing to move things forward more peacefully, you can really keep the conflict much lower than if you have 2 people with 2 very aggressive lawyers. Even just having one lawyer who's not in that aggressive mindset can bring things down tremendously. That doesn't mean they're a bad lawyer because they're not aggressive. It just means that their mindset is on trying to worry about your kids' long-term well-being versus just how much money are they going to make off the case, right? I have tons of lawyers I refer to who are wonderful humans who do this for the right reasons. So I always tell people, just call me. Like, if I'm not a fit, I'm happy to spend 15 minutes with you and tell you, hey, look, this isn't really what I do, but here's some names, right, of someone who can help you.
And that's really important. So if you're thinking about getting divorced, paternity issues, right, you're going to immediately go to, I need an attorney, right? Are you, generally speaking, more or less costly than an attorney?
A lot less costly.
Okay. So the first place to start would be to call you, Tina, right? And here's another reason to call. If you do talk with you for 15 minutes or an hour by Zoom or in person, right? And you decide you do want an attorney, most of the time, where are you going to go? You're going to go to 1-800 get an attorney, you're going to Yellow Pager, you're going to go to a billboard. That's sometimes not the best fit to find somebody.
No,
and you know attorneys who are more reasonable, who are going to potentially help them not only save money, save aggravation, save stress, right? And so you could refer them to somebody, right?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to realize this about this profession. Okay, there's a subset of people who do this work because they genuinely want to help families. Okay, they want to help people get through the process. amicably as much as possible or fight for certain things if necessary. But there are a subset of people who do this work because they know the money is there. And that is just being very blunt, okay? When people are emotional, they are irrational, they don't think straight, and if you are a professional who wants to increase your billable hours, you can egg people on and very easily do that. And unfortunately, there are certain attorneys where, you hear the name and you just kind of know, oh gosh, that's how this case is gonna go. They never wanna settle, they never wanna resolve, they always find a new issue. And so if there's any message I can give to people, even if mediation isn't a fit for you, be careful who you hire, because that person is the one grounding you when you're at a 10. Mm-hmm. That is the person who is speaking on your behalf when you are not in the room. And you need to make sure that that person represents your values and really, does this for the right reasons.
And wants to help.
And by being careful, another way to say that is use someone who you trust, someone who has experience recommends.
Yeah.
For instance, we're a real estate agent. You can always find your lender, 1-800-ROCKET Mortgage, but you're not going to have a good experience. And I would recommend a lender who I know personally, who I see out in the community, who I've known for 20 years, who's done thousands of loans for me, someone who I can guarantee you're going to have a good experience. Mm-hmm. You have the same thing with the attorneys, right?
Right.
So most of the time people talk with you and they choose to go with you almost for sure, right? With the mediation.
I would say there's a lot of people, when they first talk to me, they're very worried and stressed. They don't know where this is heading. The main motivator is fear. And by the time we finish our conversation, a lot of times there's just this feeling of relief, like, man, I don't have to lose everything we've built. I don't have to hate you at the end. This doesn't have to take 2 years. My average family I work with, we usually meet once a week for an hour, maybe 2 hours. If they're in a rush, we can push it to 3, but that's my outer marker. I won't do longer than 3-hour meetings because I just don't think people are in a headspace to make good decisions at that point. And I'm all about breaking it up, making it very palatable. We focus on one issue at a time so people can exhale and think, because that is the biggest issue with divorce. It's overwhelming. There's 1,000 decisions to be made and people don't even know where to start. And then they just get frozen. Or they just kind of find like aggressivelawyer.com, whatever, and then they go down that path. They're like, oh, the lawyer's going to handle it all. But now, you're not in a position anymore to learn how to communicate with each other again. That's a big part of what I do, is helping people learn they're not each other's enemy, that we can sit in a room and have tough conversations without going to a 10 or a 12, right? And yelling at each other or getting disrespectful, that we're able to kind of keep ourselves at that 5 and make good decisions. And by the end of it, they've learned a process of how to communicate with each other that sets them up for success as co-parents. And that's like a big passion of what I do. It's why I break it down the way I do. I want parents to have that opportunity and that space to rebuild their communication and try to find their way back to friendship. It is possible.
So even if you're mad, even if you're stressed, even if you want to get an attorney, still the smartest move you can make is to call Tina first. Spend an hour, 2 hours, 10 minutes, get centered, have her maybe refer you other professionals. Mm-hmm. That hour, 2 hours is nothing compared to the stress of a high stress court battle, which really no one wins.
No, and I tell people, look, even if there's really complicated financial issues, which sometimes there are dynamics, especially like if you have a special needs child, right? You really probably do both need lawyers, or at minimum an estate special needs planning attorney, okay? Because if there's a child who's going to need long-term care, those are very complex financial issues where you need to have experts in that conversation. But the parenting plan is generally not a legal issue. Like outside of the time sharing overnights, like how many nights are they going to be where? Because that impacts child support. Most of those, it's how you're going to communicate with each other. How are you going to communicate with the children? How are you going to handle holidays? How are you going to handle, conflict when it arises? Extracurricular decisions, medical decisions. These are really not legal issues. They become legal issues when people can't agree, right? But especially if a child has complicated special needs, it is a huge opportunity for the two people to sit with a mediator like me and work through a detailed parenting plan. Because the more details, less conflict. I tell people this all the time. The more vague your parenting plan is, the more likely you're going to have conflict in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years.
What's that mean when you say less conflict? It's a nice way to put it, but there's some things besides conflict. Is it less
Stress, less aggravation, less, tension for the kids,
but
right?
we're not talking right now. We're not talking stress right
long-term.
now. We're talking less stress to the next 15,
For the rest of your
18
life.
For the rest of your life. Less stress for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. That's worth an hour or two right there. And when you say less conflict, is conflict cheap or conflict expensive? When you say less
Very
conflict, does that
expensive.
mean less
a lot of
attorney
people
bills?
in family law say conflict equals cost,
Okay.
right? So, yeah.
So when you hear her say less conflict, that means less money that you're going to spend for no reason, right?
100%. And that's why I tell people, even if you can just mediate the parenting plan, you're still learning how to communicate with each other. The two parents are the experts in your own family's dynamic, right? The lawyers, they're experts in the law. They're not experts in your family's schedule, routine, what's best for your kids. If your kids have special needs, autism, ADHD, things that they need, different types of structure, they don't know these things. This is the two parents can sit down together and have this conversation. And then if it comes to the financials, we need to have, legal help and get those people involved. You get them involved, There's nothing stopping you from at least working through the parenting plan with a mediator, because you're going to come up with a much more detailed agreement that's really putting the kids first long term, And again, details are the key to preventing problems down the road. If if you're just trying to crank out the parenting plan, just get it done, you're going to have problems in 2 years because you've not figured out any of the stuff that's coming down the pipeline. And the biggest challenge I see with parenting plans too is there's no plan for dispute resolution. So inevitably you're not going to agree on something, right? Because you're getting divorced for a reason, okay? You're likely not aligned on all your values. So what's the plan in 2 years, 5 years, when something happens that you can't anticipate? How are you going to resolve that conflict? There needs to be a process for that. So many parenting plans, no process. So that's when you see people filing stuff in court left and right because they just don't know.
They get paid for the no process.
Yeah,
That's more money in 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So if
Recurring.
you don't think this through and we get upset, we're saying, I get an attorney, you're guaranteed to be a cash flow to finance your divorce attorney's next Porsche or Italian vacation. That's the system.
I had an attorney mediator that has been a great mentor to me. He said to me one time, he practiced family law for 15 years before he went exclusive to mediation. And he told me, you can either pay for my kids' college or yours. Choose. Because that's what it really is. If you can't stop yourself from creating more conflict, you will end up paying for your attorney's kids' college fund instead of keeping that money for your own family. And a lot of it, unfortunately, is that people do not do what they need to do to get themselves centered. They are going through a process that is highly emotional, and they are not taking the time for self-care. They are not working on regulating their emotional state, and they're making decisions rapid fire, shooting from the hip. They're not putting in place systems to create peace.
Because the only goal is to bother the other person.
Right. And that's not, at the end of the day, you're the one who loses. There's a quote that says, that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Like, that's just not how it works, right? The more negativity and anger you hold on to, the worse off you are in the end, because you can't control the other people. You can only control yourself. So that's the best advice I can give to anybody who finds themselves facing a divorce is get your head right. Because if you are dysregulated, you are going to be making all kinds of bad decisions. And missing an opportunity for resolution that might be right in front of you. I can't tell you how many times I see this. I'm sitting here looking at something, usually when I work one-on-one with someone, because their other partner is not being reasonable, and you're looking at them like, gosh, if you would just stop for a minute, you would realize that this person's trying to offer you a lot of the things you're asking for. And there's so many family law attorneys that say that too, like, we'll be so close to the finish line, and then somebody just can't get out of the way because they're emotionally just not
because
there.
They are upset.
And they'll spend another $5,000 over something that's worth $300. Do you know what I mean?
It's easy to talk about now,
Yeah.
but if you're watching this, it's not personal to you, but we'll make it. You're the one we're talking about because we all, as a human, think we're the rational, balanced, happy ones, right? So the reason why you hire a realtor, for instance, is because my job is to say, whoa, The person who gets upset always loses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
It's just back that. And so my job is to keep you from going. So if you're in a even higher stress situation with paternity
Yeah.
or divorce,
Right.
you may think you're the rational one. You may think you're centered, and her job is to make sure you're centered.
Yeah, I would say if you find yourself saying the words, I wish my ex would do
This.
blah, 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 my ex is the problem, my ex is the reason why, then actually you're probably the problem, because you need to go do your own work to figure out how to accept that you cannot change them. Because if you can change them in the marriage, you certainly can't change them after the divorce. The only thing you can do is change how you interact with them. And the sooner people realize that, the sooner they move through that stage and they get to a place of acceptance that this is a person they're never going to change, the happier they are. You see people decades after their divorce still bitter. It's like, that's a choice. You've chosen that path for yourself, right? And so what I offer to parents is a different route. Like, if you want to spend the next 30 years bitter at your ex, like I'm probably not the right person for you, right? But if you want to move through this and find your next chapter and your happiness and be able to coexist at your kid's football game and not feel angry every time you're around them, then maybe try mediation first and see how far you can get, and see if you can create a different life for yourself, because life is short. We only have so many years on this planet, and if you spend 30 of them angry at somebody, that's a wasted life from my perspective.
So probably no one's ever called an attorney and felt better at the end of it.
Oh, no.
And what Tina offers is a structure for you when, even if you think you're centered, in a very stressful time, to take a breath, to make, she is the vehicle that will deliver the structure to allow you to make better decisions, not now, but to keep more money, just not now, but later, and to make sure that your children, years and years and years from now, are much more balanced, happy, well-adjusted, because the divorce settlement was a little more fair, equitable, everybody bought into it, right? And so the repercussions of getting a bunch of attorneys to fund their child's education instead of yours could affect your family for years, or you could call her, spend an hour or two, see what happens. That seems like a pretty good trade-off for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely the reason I do this work is to prevent trauma for children. That's my whole motivator, and I really take my job seriously. I genuinely care about my clients. That's the best part of what I do. I get to really build a relationship with people over a period of time and be a part of their family's story. Like, those kids, they're never going to know me or that I existed, but I know the work that I've done significantly impacts their outcomes. It impacts their future, their relationships, eventually their children, right? It's a generational impact to this work. I've been doing the blended family thing now for 10 years, right? It's not an easy way to live. It's challenging. It has its ups and downs. You're not going to always agree. You're going to run into difficulties. And working with me also, that's one great thing, is I've done this for 10 years. The 50-50, time sharing, all the challenges that come with it. So when I work on a parenting plan with someone, I don't look at it as this vague document. I'm like, this is going to be guiding how you two parent. And so I'm bringing up things that I know are going to come up.
So you're bringing up things now to solve issues later.
Oh, yeah.
Based on your experience.
Yes.
And in a way, it's always follow the money. That's what you get paid to do, right?
Yeah.
So if you hire an attorney, which you're all thinking about doing right now, what does the attorney get paid to do?
Well, they get paid to advise you, and
Advise you on.
it's very much. This is some of the challenges too that I've heard attorneys tell me is, if they are not in a collaborative type process, right? If they are in a litigation process, there's certain things they can't really say to the other attorney because they have to maintain that kind of one-sided approach. If they're in a collaborative process, they can be more open with one another to reach resolution. But unfortunately, a lot of times it is this kind of litigation path. And whereas in mediation, we can all be very open with each other and just say, hey, this is what I'm willing to do. This is where I'm at. Here's, finding a middle ground. When you can be transparent, that's where the decisions can happen. But if everyone's holding information to themselves, it's how you hear 2 years later, people are still not divorced because no one's talking. Everyone's scared to make the first
What would
move.
motivate an attorney to make a divorce go on for 2 years?
It depends what attorney you hire.
Billable hours,
Money.
perhaps, right?
Yeah, because they bill.
And then
per
if you
hour.
have a improper, incorrect, or not thought through solution, that's just more billable hours down the road.
Down the road. And that's why I say you got to be careful. Like I said, I have some wonderful attorneys I work with who I think are just great humans, and I'm thrilled to refer them to people because I know that they're going to really take care of them. But there are a lot of attorneys in this business who will take advantage of your emotional dysregulation, and they will cause you to spend a lot of money. Yeah. And it's not even the financial cost, it's the emotional cost of this, right?
They kind of have to do that, otherwise they don't have a business. That is their business. That is their business. And your business is
peace.
In avoiding that. You seem pretty passionate about what you do. How did you come to do this? How did this become like your mission? And what made you think, this is where I want to spend my life every day?
Yeah, so I, like I said, I've been a stepmom for 10 years. My stepsons were 5 and 7 when I met my husband. They are now teenagers, freshman and senior. One's about to be 18 in like 2 weeks, which is crazy. I can't even believe it. But, it's had its ups and downs, right? And I realized over the years that the actual divorce process itself is a big problem for people because whatever was not broken in the marriage often gets broken by the actual process of divorce. This mindset of 2 tables, 2 lawyers, 2 rooms, we're not talking to each other anymore. And then my parents actually got divorced 6 years ago when I was an adult. Oh, wow. And they had the complete opposite kind of divorce. It was 15 minutes, kitchen table, we're gonna divide everything up. They're still really good friends. They talk every week. My mom's friends with his fiance. Like they're completely amicable, right? Genuinely care about each other. And I'll never forget, they told me, they said, Tina, if after 35 years together, we can't do this amicably, then we've wasted our lives. And that always, that really struck me because I was like, man, there's a different way to do this. And there's gotta be people out here looking for it and they just can't find it. And that's when I said, I'm gonna set up a business where I'm offering an option for those people who wanna be amicable, who need someone to guide them. They don't wanna do it totally themselves, but they wanna do it a different way. And that's where that business was born, and that's what I'm doing.
So you said for people who want to be amicable, rarely do they actually start off wanting to be amicable. So people who are watching this may not be thinking, well, that's me, I want to be amicable. So your job is to convince them, show them, coach them, show them the advantages of being amicable. Would you agree with that, or would you want to say that another way?
I mean, I would say that you have to want peace in your life, and you have to choose that every day. Okay, people don't just have an amicable divorce, people choose an amicable divorce. That doesn't mean you like everything about the other person. It doesn't mean you're best friends. It means that you're choosing to show up in a process where when you hit a roadblock and it gets hard, you look inside and have that introspective moment and say, how can I better approach this, versus pointing the finger and saying they're the problem. And this is the key element of having a happy, healthy life anywhere, right? How many books are there about mindfulness and self-awareness and, controlling what you can control? It's no different with divorce. You can choose to spend 20 years angry at someone, or you can choose to say, you know what? They are who they are. We had our life. It didn't work out. And now I'm going to choose a different path. Yeah. And that's the bottom line. And if that's what you want, then I can provide a process for that. I can't wake up for you every day and make those choices, but I can provide you a space that gives you that opportunity to move through this efficiently. Most of my cases were done in 3 to 4 months with all the agreements instead of 2 years.
You said you could provide them the space, but what I think is invisible to you, because your life is providing the space. That's what you're doing, right? It's not, so that's what you do is provide the space, but what you're offering is the opportunity to create a space where you could maybe choose peace and maybe choose to not spend all your money on attorneys and maybe have a different experience, right? And when you call an attorney right away, there's no choice for a different experience. So what you're offering when people are thinking about hiring you from the outset is an opportunity to find a different way, a different paradigm, something that you're not going to see if you start Googling this or watching TikTok videos, right? There's a different way to do this, and how you find out about a different way is you watch this video, and then how you find out a different way is you call her. How much does it cost to call and talk to you for 15 minutes?
I do free consults.
Oh my God, explain it. So you mean it's free?
Yeah, so I'll talk to anybody for 20, 30 minutes just to see if I can help them. Even if I'm not the right fit, I'm happy to talk to people. Because, at the end of the day, I do this work because I really care about what I do. It's not just money in the bank for me. So if I can help connect someone get them on a path that helps their kids a different way, that's a win for me. That's a day's work that I can be proud of. They say like do a job that you would do for free, and that's kind of where I'm at. This is a second career for me, and there's a reason why I'm doing this, because I genuinely love the work that I do.
So if you're watching this now, I want you to rewind and play back what you just said. And then I want you to look up the attorney that you're thinking about calling. And I want you to see if anywhere, ever once, you can see anyone involved in the divorce process who's going to say anything even similar, even close to that. And if that's what you want to work with, okay, but you know how that's going to turn out. So that's what you're offering. It's an opportunity to say, you know what, you love it because you know you make a difference. You can make a difference to these people. It doesn't cost anything to look into. And it could just affect maybe the rest of your life.
Literally the rest of your life. Yeah, because also, I think sometimes people forget this. They're like, oh, I want to get divorced. I don't want to be with you anymore. But then, by the way, we have children that we're parenting the rest of our lives. And it doesn't just end when they're 18. People have this 18 number in their head. False, because they're still gonna go to college. Now it's actually different issues, because now there's no time sharing schedule for Thanksgiving. Now the kids have to just figure out where they're gonna go. Now, they still go to college graduations. They're gonna have grandkids one day, right? And now you guys have to figure out how you're gonna coexist. Are you gonna hate each other every time your grandkid has a recital? You can't be in the same room together after 15, 20 years. That's crazy. Is that how you wanna live your life? You cannot change what's happened in the past, but you can change from this point forward.
So no one wants to live their life that way.
Yeah.
But they make decisions during this process that make that the only option for the rest of their life. They then reduce their options, and the only option is the stress, the regret, the money, right?
Oh yeah. I tell my stepson this all the time, as they're teenagers. Your life is a sum of the decisions you make, period. Small ones, big ones, mostly the small ones. And every day how you show up and all the things you do defines your life. And divorce is no different. Every small decision you make, every interaction, every time you choose to be angry or choose that sort of letting yourself get to a 12 and reacting that way, you're making the choices that are setting you and your children up for a certain type of future. And if you want a different future for yourself, you have to make those choices. You can't rely on your ex to make those choices, because you'll never change what they do. But you can influence it. It takes two people to fight. So if one person is not feeding it, that's one of the things I do with people too. I work one-on-one with parents. I'm trained in a high conflict program by Bill Eddy, who's an expert in high conflict personalities. And it's all about learning to regulate yourself better when dealing with a really difficult person, both with verbal communications, with texting, with email, learning how to better regulate you, because you cannot change another person. And there's so much power in that. Once you realize that, it's life-changing.
This is about setting yourself up to have a much better rest of your life. And so many times, this is not a secret, maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but a lot of times when people separate, they're thinking, maybe one day I'm going to get a new partner. And so you want to make yourself attractive to the new partner. And think how much more attractive you'll be with a new partner when you have an ex and child custody, child sharing solutions that everybody's peaceful and happy with, as opposed to, I hate my ex. Right. It actually makes you qualified for the next level of partner that you're thinking that you want to deserve right now. If you want to know, how do I get there? This is how you get there.
That's actually a very good point that a lot of people don't think about. You're right. All this anger, all this negativity that you're dragging through your life, who wants to bring that into their life, right?
Because your new partner is going to listen to how you spoke about your last partner, which is a outcome of the attorneys in the divorce or the gentle mediation, and they're going to say, this is my future. So let's set you up for a better future with the next part of your life, which is one of the reasons why you're doing this.
Okay, so I realize, and I think that mediation is the best way to go in a divorce, definitely. But sometimes, there's some disagreements, and I know that the people, they can talk, but what happens if one of them decide that they don't want to sell the house?
As far as how you move forward with that?
Yeah.
So again, I think it's all about the process you choose, right? So you could come in, again, I could have two people come into a mediation where one person is like, I want to keep the house, I want to stay in the house. The other person is, really wants to sell, right? So that's my job as the mediator, is to recognize right away, okay, we're like on separate islands here. Okay, so first of all, these people probably need to talk to a consultant on mortgages. They need to talk to real estate people. They need to talk to people who can explain to them what the market is like, what the options are, because they need information. And this is one of the biggest things I like to do with my clients is I'm not an expert in everything. Nobody is, right? Nobody can know everything about everything. So I need to get you connected with people who can give you data, because you can't make decisions without data. So while they're doing all that, then we can work on other things. So then my goal is, while you get that data, I'm gonna get you guys rebuilding rapport. We're gonna focus on the easy wins. We're gonna focus on, when I look at a marital settlement agreement, I focus on the things I know are gonna be quick positives for them. Let's get some good momentum going before we get into the hardest issue, right? A lot of people, alimony is a tough one, marital home, those are the two big issues usually. And so my job is the process. How am I gonna frame this? How am I gonna get us moving forward, positive momentum, getting the information they need so they can make a sound decision? Because a lot of times, once someone actually gets the data, they themselves can look at it and be like, gosh, you know what? This isn't gonna work.
Yeah,
Because I can't
people
qualify.
yeah.
Or maybe it does make sense to sell because the market's hot
I
right now.
cannot maintain the house.
Right, or I can't maintain
Usually the women, they want to keep the houses, but unfortunately, if they are stay-at-home moms, they cannot maintain the house.
I did not say that.
No, but it is true.
But there is power in the budget, right? So I'll ask people, sit
That
down
is
and do
true.
a budget. So once they start putting, okay, the cost of the pool, the cost of the lawn, the cost of the electric, all these things mount, and then you look at, okay, well now we have the same income for two households. This is unrealistic, right? And so, but this is, again, I don't necessarily have to tell them that, and they don't even have to tell each other that. Sometimes meeting with the right professionals or doing the data gathering, they figure it out on their own. And if we've built a good rapport by that point, then they can make a good decision together, where it doesn't feel like they're on a risk game board trying to battle for positions, right? Like they can actually take a step back and just make the right call for everyone.
And as far as how that's done, we were speaking off camera before we started here, and you were telling me about how a lot of times divorce mediations end up in these 3 or 4 hour marathon sessions, and you said you like to do it different. Tell us how you do it different and why we do it that way.
Yeah, so the traditional, when you think of mediation when it comes to divorce, a lot of times it's two people already have lawyers retained. They are pretty far into the negotiation process, but they get stuck on certain issues. So then they'll go to a mediation where each one's in their own room with their lawyer. You have an attorney mediator that goes back and forth between rooms, and it's like an 8-hour day or a 4-hour day. Those are kind of the two formats. I personally, I work with pro se clients, meaning they don't have lawyers. I don't think people make good decisions anymore after a maximum of 3 hours. I mean, this is all very emotional stuff. People are overwhelmed by all the choices they have to make. By 2 hours in, their eyes are glazing over. So my whole focus is let's make this feel palatable. Let's not make it feel so overwhelming. So I meet with people once a week, usually 1 hour, sometimes 2, depending. And then we go through, little bits at a time.
And then at the end of the hour, everyone goes home.
And feels like they've accomplished something. And we've done something.
Well, here's my point. They go home and they think about it.
They
settle down. They talk with their friends, their family. And then they come back, and they're probably in a different space the next hour, right?
Yeah, well, and a lot of divorce that's frustrating is you feel like you're not making any progress. So a lot of times you're waiting for your lawyer to call you. You're like, when are we doing something? And there's so many elements you don't have control over. So what I like to do is make people feel empowered, like they have control. So we get in there. In that hour, we're getting something done. By the time they leave, we're getting part of that parenting plan finished. And so they can walk out feeling like, okay, we accomplished something today in this hour.
And the part that's not finished, I'm a big believer in incubation. So the part that's not finished is the part that you think about. And even sometimes, what do they say? We got to sleep on it. Well, why do you sleep on it? Because when it wakes up the next morning, it looks like a different issue. So you sleep on it for a week, and doesn't mean you'll change, but it means you'll look at the issue different. And that's how you
100%.
save money, not have stress, and set up something that's going to put the children in a place where they have happier lives for the rest of their life.
I have more questions.
Yes.
So what happened if one of the spouse bought the house before they were married.
So that kind of depends. Like I would say, again, with what I do, it's all what you can both agree to, right? So I see people where I've got one case like that right now. The house was purchased before the marriage, but they lived together in it as a marital home for many years. They both split all the bills. So they both view it as a marital home. They're not saying, oh, this was my house before. What a judge would do by statute, you can't even really answer that question. People say, what would a judge do? There's really no right answer to that because there's so many factors. But the reality is, if you're in a mediation setting, you can account for whatever you want to. So you can both agree, okay, this was premarital, or you can say a portion was premarital. So you might say like, okay, if the house is worth $500, maybe if they owned it for 5 years prior, we divide it up. We look at the total number of years. You take a portion of equity and put it to the side. But again, it's just having the space to have these conversations.
So I think I heard what you say, may not have been exactly.
Yeah.
So you go before a judge.
You have no
Speaking to one of you, the judge is going to do what the judge is going to do.
Yes.
Maybe the judge had a bad burrito for lunch, and then it's the rest of your life. And if you do it with you and your process, not only is it more affordable, but also you get to say. You want to say? You know what to do.
So I see a lot of times where people kind of have that need for retaining control, right? I see this all the time with time sharing. Okay, you've got, Florida right now, as of last July, is now a 50-50 presumption of time sharing, which means you're getting 50-50 unless you're like off the rails, or if you both agree you don't want it to be that way. What's challenging now with the 50-50 presumption is that it makes people have this idea in their head that like, I'm not a good parent if I don't have 50-50 custody, which is not the case at all. You're a good parent if you put your kids' needs first. And if your kid does better with being in one house 60-70% of the overnights, that's great for them. Like, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong way to do this. But often you see in divorce proceedings where one parent wants majority custody, the other parent maybe wants something else, and they just cannot relinquish this control over the outcome that they want. And what they fail to realize is if you guys cannot come to some kind of compromise right now, you're literally giving all of your control away. Because then when you go before a judge, they will do whatever they want to do. And then you have zero control. So you're better off compromising a little bit, and then you retain still, you can control which days who has who, we can make some adjustments, and then you have like 80% control or zero. So like, which is better, And this is the thing that I would tell the people, like, take a breath and realize that the judge might not agree with you. And you might walk out with nothing when you could instead take a breath and find a compromise.
And no one who goes into court and walks out with nothing thinks walking into court earlier that day that that's how it was going to work
100%,
out.
yeah.
They all think, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And maybe you won't. So this is the way for you to have the control that you need.
And once there's a court order, that's it. That's a wrap, because unless the other person agrees to change it, unless you both agree to change it,
There's none.
that's a court order. So you have to follow it. And that is, there's no coming back from that. And then talk about being bitter for the rest of your life,
One of the things that we see selling houses, people don't buy and sell houses that much. And a lot of times, some of our best clients actually tell me, whatever you think, you're in charge. And those are the people who make the most money and sell the quickest and say, there was nothing for me to do. There's nothing for you to do. I got it all, right? Because I've been through the experience over and over and over again. So how many times does someone get separated? Just a few times in their life, maybe once.
Twice.
So
maybe twice.
If you're watching this, it's a pretty fair bet to say this is your first time. And how many things have you done the first time and you looked back and you said, I wish if I only would have known. Well, you can get an attorney who does not have a vested interest in helping you through that, or you can work with someone like her who's done it hundreds and hundreds of times, someone who has experience who's going to say, when you're all done with this, you say, oh my gosh, consult your experts, consult a mediator.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity loss, I think, with the process people choose, I think it's just for a lack of understanding also. A lot of people that come to me, like, they don't even understand how divorce works in the state of Florida, right? That's like the first thing I usually...
You'll figure it out.
Right.
You'll figure it out on your own.
Yeah, well, that's usually the first 10 minutes. I just explain to them high level, like, what does it even mean, right? How does this work? So Just having somebody that has your vested interest is important, and who genuinely cares about what they do is important. Like I said, there's some great lawyers who do, but just be careful. And I tell people too, like, be careful who you surround yourself with, because if you're going through a divorce and everybody you're talking to had nasty divorces or hates their ex, or you're following all these TikTok and Instagram pages that are like, my ex is the worst, see what he did, look at the, that's not productive. That's really not productive.
It's not just not productive, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And stressful. So you said, be careful who you surround yourself with. So even if you choose not to go through the whole mediation process, right? Tina surrounds herself with attorneys who are of somewhat of a like mind. So the people she's chosen to surround herself with are also going to do this because they have a mission, because they want your best outcome, and because they're not just trying to rack up the bill and get you mad and get you fighting. They want something that's good for you, for your life, for your next partner, and for your children. And if you think that sounds kind of pat or trite, talk to your attorney and see what they say about this. They're not even going to mention it.
Who is responsible for paying the mortgage and property taxes during the divorce process?
I would say, so like my clients usually, we do what's called pre-suit mediation, which means nobody's filed for divorce yet. So, usually they're still sharing all their expenses till the very end. When you do your marital settlement agreement, you'll eventually have something called like your financial division date. That's like the date that we say, as of this date, our finances are separate, right? So a lot of times up till that point, the people I work with will still do everything as they had previously. And then part of what we write into the agreement is they decide if there's already money in escrow or something like that, does the person who keeps the house keep the escrow? Is there going to be, money paid out from that due to the person keeping the home, things like that, depending how they want to do it. So it's really all within their control how they want to handle that.
Okay. And then here's one really good question. How does the selling a home in a divorce affect capital gain taxes?
So I'm big on involving experts. So I tell clients, talk to your CPA before you finalize this agreement. Like, we can say everything in theory, but until you understand the tax implications, I probably wouldn't sign the document. And that's not really even a legal question for your attorney. That's a question for a tax accountant who understands what are the implications of this. Because if you've only had the house for a year, right, there is a reality of capital gains tax. So would it make more sense to agree to sell it in 9 months or whatever when you hit the 2-year mark so you don't get hit with that? Maybe.
Yes, usually.
Right. So, but you need to have that conversation,
Usually.
and then you guys can write up the agreement to do all of that, because you can write up an agreement to delay things or to adjust. If it's part of your dissolution of marriage, it's still not, it's still part of the divorce proceedings. So whether you pay it out today or in 9 months, it doesn't matter, but it could make a huge implication on your taxes. So again, experts need to be involved in every step of the process before you finalize anything.
And do you refer them to other experts other than attorneys?
Yeah, if they need them. A lot of times people I work with will already have a CPA, but financial planners, sometimes I'll refer them to. If there's complex financials, a certified divorce financial analyst might be a good option, where they get all the financial discovery, they run a bunch of models, they do the financial side, and then we can just in mediation make the decisions once they have that information. So yeah, I definitely have people I can refer them to. But I'm always kind of harping on that. Make sure you understand what you're signing. Because in mediation, the big, word, right, in mediation is self-determination. A person has to be able to make a decision, understand why they made it, and feel good about that decision. If at any point as a mediator, I feel like somebody cannot do that, I have a responsibility to stop and say, hey, look, you don't seem confident in this. So perhaps you should talk to a CPA. Perhaps you should take a week to sleep on it. Perhaps you should consult with a lawyer. Perhaps you should call a realtor. Like, that's where my job ethically is, to step in and say, you don't seem confident. I'm not gonna allow you to move forward until I've said my piece that I feel like you might need more advice.
Another good question is, should I sell the house before or after finalize the divorce?
Well, that I feel like every answer is that it depends, but again, it depends, right? So I have parents, where the children are still in the home. One of them wants to keep the house, so they don't even sell at all. I have some people who choose to sell the house while they're in the divorce process collaboratively. They both want to sell because they both want to move, and it makes it easier for them. So they want to just sell and then have the funds to distribute to both get our own thing, right? So there's really no right or wrong answer. I mean, you shouldn't probably you really can't do anything without your spouse's consent anyhow. The title won't close the real estate purchase anyways without your spouse's consent. But if you're both, on the same page, there's no reason why you can't sell a home and then both move into apartments or something, lower the costs and have more equity, liquid equity to divide up if that's what you both want to do.
And I've worked with many, many clients on both sides of that, and laughing. It's never easy before the divorce. There's always fighting and the emotions, and it's always a mess. It is easier to sell after the divorce, but it may take a long time to pay the house payments and then maintain the house to get to that point.
Well, and you kind of end up being a mediator a little bit if you're the realtor.
Oh,
If you're getting divorced for a reason and you
Divorce.
sell the house before you get the divorce, it's just not going to go good. Okay? But still, if that's what you need to do, then we'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
How can a real estate agent help you during the divorce process?
I think a big part of it is information gathering. Like I said, a lot of times people are really lost with what to do with a marital home because it's usually their biggest asset. Most people, they work really hard to be able to buy that first home. They get married, they buy the house together. It's like this huge moment for them. And then when facing a divorce, a lot of times that's probably the biggest chunk of money you have, right? The most important thing you own. So being able to consult with somebody who understands the market and who can give you information to understand, is this the right option for you to sell? Or, could we look at one person maybe keeps the house and the other person buys something, and understanding like what the options are even available. I'm a big believer in information. You cannot make good decisions without good information. So again, consulting with a real estate agent, consulting with a mortgage broker, understanding what you even can do, then you can both make the best decision where everybody comes out winning instead of someone feeling like they lost everything, because that's never a good outcome. Having a winner and a loser in divorce, that is not a recipe for a good co-parenting relationship for the next 15, 20 years. It's just not going to happen. So the more we can find a solution where both people walk out feeling good about it, and getting something they need or want out of it, the better off everybody is.
So I have one extra question.
Yeah.
So with 22,000 realtors in the area of Orlando, how do you choose a real estate agent when your cousin is a realtor, your friend is a realtor, but you don't want the wife's friend, you don't want the husband's cousin?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
So I would tell people this: when you're going through a divorce, you need to have experienced people that you're working with if you're bringing experts in, because divorce is very nuanced. There's a lot that goes into it that is different than a first-time home buy or, a VA loan or whatever it is. Like, divorce is very complicated, not just financially, but emotionally complicated. A lot of times the marital home is the physical representation of the family. So a lot of times there's one person has a really hard time letting go of that. And so you need to have a realtor involved who is empathetic and able to understand that and approach it with that level of care that it deserves, because this is usually the biggest asset. And you're going from, one household into two, so every dollar counts, right? You're trying to rebuild a new life for yourself. So you can't really afford to make mistakes, So yeah, I would definitely say experience is really important, and having people that are local versus you don't want to go searching on Google for things. That's what I told you too with the attorneys. You don't want to search on Google for these things. Find somebody that has a good reputation, who's worked with people and not just who's worked with people but where those people had the kind of outcome that you want to see yourself have. And it's like that with real estate, it's like that with mortgage, and it's like that with attorneys. I wouldn't take an attorney referral from someone with a highly litigated divorce that cost them $100,000 if that's not what you want to do, right? And same with real estate, working with people who, are able to get you to that outcome that you're looking for, and have the sensitivity to have respect for both people, and be able to really address everybody's concerns. It's really important.
And having a team, it helps, we don't take parts, we just help the couple and do the best for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's like, I will do the best for him, I will do the best for her.
No, but I mean, that actually would be helpful, yeah, if you have two people, because then you can sort of, if it does get a little bit, heated, you can say, hey, why don't you come have this conversation, and then we can,
I've done it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
I understand what that's like. And you also want to get a realtor who's not going to buy into the drama, because there's a lot of drama.
Yeah.
A lot of drama.
And
hiring
again,
someone to get your home sold easily, quickly, with no drama.
and also who's ethical, who will tell you if it's not the best move to sell your home.
For
Because
sure.
this is, again, comes to the attorney thing we talked about before about the ethics of this business. You have to also work with people who might look at you and say, you know what, I'm not sure if this is going to be a good financial move for you to sell this home. Maybe you should keep it, and then maybe she buys a new home, right? Like, be able to have that experience to look at something and be honest with people, because like you guys have been doing this for a long time in the community. You have a reputation to preserve. There's a reason why you're where you're at in your career, because you're not just trying to, like what we talked about with the attorneys that have a bad attitude, just like make money, right? Like, you're not in it for that reason. You genuinely care about what you do. And that is a difference between going online and Googling some random person, because they're not going to have a vested interest.
Yeah.
You have, again, a reputation to protect, a tie to the community. You care about people. And that's a different approach, right? You're going to actually care about your client's outcome.
And sometimes it's difficult. Remember the last time that we went to see this couple? There was so much going on that we couldn't help.
Yeah. And that happens sometimes, and this is what I've said the whole time we've been talking. Sometimes people will not get out of their own way with these things, and that's just something we have to accept as professionals. I can't help everybody, but I can help a lot of people,
Most of
right?
them, yeah.
And that's what I'm here for, is to help the ones that I can help.
Yeah.
So
Is there anything after you do a podcast or any type of interview that you wish people would have heard, that you say, I wish that I could have got across this, or I want to leave them with this thought?
I would say to try to look at this time in your life as a restructuring of the family unit, versus, like we're enemies on two islands. Because the reality is, if you have children together, you are stuck with each other. Like, you still have to have a certain level of relationship. It's not a romantic one anymore, but it is a co-parenting relationship. I had a client recently, I'm still working with them, we're getting close to being done on their case. And I always start with goals, my first session with people, right? The first 5 minutes I ask them, what are your goals? And one of the things he said struck me. He said, we built this partnership together over years, and it was a romantic partnership, and it was, a friendship, and it was a parenting partnership, and all of these pieces, and a financial partnership. And one of those things fell apart, the romantic partnership. But the rest, my goal is that the rest stay intact, that we still care about each other's well-being financially, that we still have a good parenting partnership, that we still remain, friends, and that we can do things together with our kids. And that's really what it is. One part broke down, but that doesn't mean everything else has to. That's a choice. It's a choice if the rest breaks down.
And if you want a choice, call Tina, and what she does professionally, what her mission is to give you choices that our community, that our culture doesn't normally give people who are in situations like you. So if you want a choice, make the choice to give her a call.
Yeah. And if you are going through a divorce, just remember, there's options like Tina with mediation, and we can definitely help you with the experience that we have. Unfortunately, in my case, going through divorce, but we definitely can help you with your real estate.
We want to be part of your team.
Yeah, we want to. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
That was great. That was great information. We really appreciate you
Yeah,
being here.
I appreciate you having me.